Welcome to Music Industry Mondays here at the Music Box. Every week we gather here to get into the finer details of the inner workings of the music industry with esteemed industry guests giving you their insights, their experience and their knowledge of what's actually going on in the industry right now. And thank you everyone for turning up and here to learn. And I'd like you to give a warm Music Box welcome to our guest this evening, Greg Parmley.
Thanks very much.
Greg is the CEO of Live, the industry trade body for the entire UK live sector, which is fantastic. So you've got the top guy looking after the interests of all live promoters, live agents, live performers. We'll get into some of that in a minute in terms of what everyone does. And you also run a conference on live music, the International Live Music Conference.
That's right, yeah. So I have sort of a few strings in my bow. So ILMC, which is the International Live Music Conference, is sort of the longest running international event for the live music industry. And we also run a magazine called IQ as well, which is a print magazine and also a daily news service as well. So we have a kind of a team of 3 journalists that are writing news constantly, and that kind of goes out on a daily basis to about sort of 15,000 people around the world.
Wow. Okay. So it's a digital magazine rather than print, or is it both?
We were print until COVID, and then since then we've been digital. Partly because no one's advertising anymore, or currently rather, and partly because everyone's been sort of home working and moving around. So sending a print publication that you've printed to someone's office there's probably a sort of 30% chance they're actually going to see it at the moment.
Okay. And slight diversion from live music, but in terms of that transition, distributing and having your readers online and digital rather than distributing print, are the pros and cons of that? Do you see more engagement, more aware of who your readers are?
Yeah, completely. So, I mean, we actually pre-COVID, well, the audience or reader numbers have more than doubled since we've moved online with COVID. So, we have about 100,000 people a month now on the website reading news. So that's obviously a sort of a huge benefit. The actual size of the audience has grown internationally quite a lot, but the flip side is that it's very difficult. It's much harder to monetize digital and online than it is print for sure. So swings and roundabouts.
Good to hear it's going well. So getting into the main topic for today, the live music industry. Let's just park COVID for 1 minute because we want to hear about how it normally works. And always say to our students, the music industry is not one industry. It's lots of different industries that come together, all through the common love and exploitation and promotion of music in all its forms. But actually the live music industry isn't traditionally what first people think of when they think of music and the music industry. They think of record companies and the promotion of artists. But the live sector certainly was, up until COVID, the biggest of all of the sectors within music.
Correct, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, if you look at the evolution of the live sector over the last, say, like 30 years, which is obviously a very long time, but historically, artists would tour to promote an album. So there'll be an album release and there'll be a tour around it, which is really a kind of a promotional thing. That's completely flipped now. So especially if you look at the kind of, the sort of average ticket prices for big artists have grown exponentially in the last over the last couple of decades. So now artists will generate fairly substantial income, amounts of money from tours. So yeah, but I think you're right. I think people still think when they think about the music industry, they still think about streaming or recording. I think that sort of the live shows really kind of come second, but actually for many artists now, it's where they're making most of their money will come from touring. Certainly those sort of mid-level artists, who are kind of career artists who are maybe not right at that sort of top table, but sort of 60-70% of what they earn can come from live gigs, and then merchandise and sort of other ancillary incomes around that as well.
I remember in the 1990s, I think, when production value suddenly started sort of being ramped up. You had bands like U2 and the Pet Shop Boys, pushing the boundaries, and then we got into the noughties and you had Daft Punk and transitions where a lot more was expected of what a live show entailed.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just on that. I mean, especially in the venues as well, right? So when the O2 opened in London, like the experience of going to an arena concert before that was horrible. It was sort of sticky floors, and you were lucky to get a burger that was vaguely warm. Beer was crap and flat. And then suddenly, the O2 opened, and there's a shopping district around the arena, and it's like, and everything's nice, and the seats are comfortable. You can kind of sit, and the acoustics are great because they spent however much money on kind of the acoustic lining of the whole dome. And that sort of moments like that, when someone sort of makes this sort of leap into that like next kind of stage, like really forces everyone else to up the game. So within 5 years of the O2 opening, like all the other arenas in the UK suddenly were much nicer because they had to actually spend some money on the experience. So it's not. I think it's partly sort of production values. There's always kind of new kit, new stuff that's kind of coming out that creates like a wow factor, which is partly what's driving up ticket prices as well, because that kind of new stuff is always more expensive.
That was my follow-up question of whether you thought the increase in ticket prices was a result of those new technologies and the costs of putting on a show and the raised expectations of what a show experience is.
Yeah.
And then you've made the very good point about improved experience in arenas. So do you think that alone drove up ticket prices, the kind of inner workings of the sector, or do you think it was matched with the troubles with recorded music and the digital transition that artists were looking for higher revenue?
No, I think live has always been its own profit center. So when artists are thinking about a tour, I think they think about it as a sort of self-contained thing. The days of record labels having sort of tour support for artists is long gone. So touring has to exist as its own profit center, its own sort of financial kind of concern. But it's interesting. I mean, what's driving up ticket prices? I mean, definitely production. People's expectations. If you're a fan, you've got so much choice now that you never had before in terms of artists touring so much. There's so much content out there, especially next year, which I'm sure we'll get into talking about COVID. I mean, there's never going to been so many shows that are on sale at any one point. So if you're a touring production, you have to compete with that. You have to give people something that they haven't seen before, or that's unique, or that's particular to that artist. So yeah, I think a lot of the increases come from that. I also think that during the whole kind of Napster era, where CD sales were kind of plummeting and artists weren't making any money from streaming at that point, they had to figure out how to make money from somewhere else. And so I think sort of part of the increase in ticket sales has naturally come from that
replacement revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've also got, the industry as a whole is much more of a professional outfit than it used to be. So, being a promoter 25 years ago was a pretty shady business, right? You were sort of fairly, kind of cut and thrust, and it was all a bit sort of, it was an industry sort of kind of populated by rogues, I guess. Whereas now, the promoting companies that exist, from Live Nation or AEG or any other bigger companies you can name are very, very professional outfits. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an expectation of profit there as well, which maybe there wasn't before. So I think that's also sort of part of it.
But with those big groups, and a lot of them own the venues now, there's an emphasis, I think, certainly in the bigger shows, that they can hand over more of the money, the ticket money, to the artists, because they can make money on all the ancillary stuff, the catering, the parking, cut of merchandise. I'm not entirely sure, but do you see that across the sector, that those big groups have changed the settlement for artists? Yeah,
totally. So I mean, for the sort of bigger artists, I mean, they'll take upwards of 90% of all the ticket income, which obviously doesn't, when you factor in all the other sort of people that want to get paid around a show, it doesn't sort of leave too much. But Yeah, I mean, I think someone sort of famously once said that Live Nation is not in the concert promotion business; it's in the popcorn and parking business, because they own, certainly in the US, sort of they own or they manage so many of the bigger venues that's where they're making the money. Live Nation also owns Ticketmaster, which is obviously one of the biggest ticketing company in the world. So they'll by driving shows through Ticketmaster, they're also then generating that booking fee, and that booking fee is something that the promoters and the ticketing company will typically share. So yeah, I think there's the way that the economics of shows are sort of split up. There are lots of sort of different areas that people are sort of dipping into different ways, or finding ways to kind of keep their offices running.
Yeah, and those kind of splits and settlements for artists, does it vary depending on what level the act's at? So the big acts can take 90% of the door, but when you're starting out, if you're playing a venue this size, 100 capacity, you're probably not even getting paid at all, or you have to bring 20 friends with you to get the slot. Yeah,
I was having a conversation with someone actually last week, and they were talking about a time in the 70s where it was the old manager of Dire Straits, who was saying that in back in the day they were paying their support acts £50. I think you're still getting paid £50 now to play in a small venue. If anything at all. So the economics of the live industry is definitely skewed towards the top end. I think it's very difficult to make any money until you're selling out 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 capacity venues. That's the point at which I think shows start to become kind of profitable, really.
So that's the magic number.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, and then you mentioned the sort of promotional cycle of artists doing tours to promote the album. And now, in a way, if you think about the big acts at the top end, it's almost like Ed Sheeran's just making another album in order to then go back on another world tour. So it's flipped completely. Yeah, totally.
I mean, I think part of that is due to kind of sort of longer time frames with regards to tour planning. So if you want a stadium date at the say you've got you take on a big act, they want to do a stadium show, which would be amazing, right? There's good money in stadiums. You're probably looking at 2024 realistically in terms of dates before you've got any availability.
Availability of the stadiums.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of it is also that, and it's the same with arenas as well. I mean, it's very, very difficult to get any dates anywhere in big venues now for 2022 already. So we're talking about kind of 12-month lead times. So I think because those lead times for the bigger artists have got so much longer, it's difficult to sort of try and marry up release schedules at the same time with that.
I mean, you mentioned that, and obviously we have to go back a couple of years to get examples, as far as I'm aware, but someone like Lewis Capaldi sort of blows up, seems like virtually overnight, and then after, one or two singles is able to put a show at the O2 on sale. So must have found availability fairly quickly, or are they selling for like a year or 18 months in advance?
Yeah, I think they probably still have been planning like a year in advance, 9 months in advance, something like that. I mean, I do think where we're at as an industry at the moment has also been skewed by the fact that there's been nothing really happening for the last 18 months as well. So there's a backlog of stuff that's kind of, all the stuff that was planned for the last 2 years is shifting into next year, as well as everything that was already planned for next year. So I think we're in a kind of a crazy situation at the moment where there's just a lot of live stuff waiting to happen.
Okay, so and that's pushing the availability even further down the line.
Yep.
You've got a backlog of shows, and I was speaking to a promoter recently who promotes some big names and would definitely have some shows that have been affected and been pushed down the track, but they've literally done no business at all in the last 18 months in terms of new sales. So everything is just the pushing back of the existing shows. So we have to talk about COVID. How has the sector survived? And can we come out the other side? In a healthy state.
Well, it's what is that? It's probably this is the £1.5 billion question, isn't it? Yeah, look, I think ultimately, yeah, it'll be back in some shape. I think how has it survived? I mean, the last 18 months, a lot of what I've been doing in the last 18 months with live. I mean, just to go back a little bit, 15 months ago, we didn't have an association in the UK that represented the live music industry. We have UK Music, which there was sort of a live arm of UK Music, but there wasn't anything that really spoke on behalf of the sector. So in July last year, June last year, we pulled all the 13 different associations together, which is the Concert Promoters Association, the Agent Association, the 2 festival associations, Music Managers Forum, Featured Artists Coalition. I won't name them all, but it's effectively everybody across sort of ticketing, production, venues, agencies, whatever, and formed live. And the first thing that we did was a campaign called Let the Music Play, which is a big sort of artist-driven social media campaign, which we engaged lots of sort of concert goers with as well. And I think that was the largest sort of social media campaign in music that's ever been run. Wow. That really helped raise the profile of the situation that the live industry was in to government, and as a result of that, we got this thing called the Culture Recovery Fund, which was a £1.57 billion pot that the government put into culture, which was originally going to be quite a bit smaller than that. And after Let the Music Play, that was sort of topped up, and also the commercial industry was included in it. So originally it wasn't something that the kind of rock and roll promoters or rap agents were going to be able to
keep the opera houses trading.
Yeah, absolutely. It was and art galleries and stately homes and whatever. So that actually that worked really well, and then we spent quite a lot of time then lobbying to make sure that say festivals were included. So originally, when it first came out, it was just going to be venues. They were just saving bricks and mortar companies, and then we were like, well, that's not fair, because you've got venues, you've got production companies, you've got promoters, agents. So we lobbied for quite successfully for that. So in total, I think we've had about £170 million of funding's gone directly into the commercial live music industry, which is really good. And so then since then, the sector's just kind of been working really collaboratively to have a voice in government. I mean, we're on sort of various different working groups about kind of reopening guidance for festivals. We're involved in this thing called the Events Research Programme, which is when there were a load of pilot shows that ran in the UK. And so there's just been a lot of work by a lot of different people over the last 18 months to make sure that we've got as much support from government in the UK as we possibly can. And I think we've been fairly successful at that. We've not won everything that we've tried to do, but we've won most things. I think the sector's kind of it's sort of fought tooth and nail to keep itself alive. Coming out of things now, I mean, actually, if you'd asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I'd have been much more enthusiastic.
Oh no!
I think the arrival of Omicron, which sounds like some sort of kind of Star
Transformers baddie or something.
It sounds like some sort of Star Wars like massive ship that lands and like casts a shadow on a planet, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But that's been a real bummer, actually. It's certainly. I mean, we've. People are getting a lot more nervous again. We're seeing more restrictions coming in Northern Ireland, in Wales, Scotland. I think was already had quite a few restrictions. So it's sort of. I think the beginning of next year is still going to be quite difficult. Actually, I think we'll probably still see more restrictions come in. But I mean, I think by the end of next year, I think things will be looking a lot more rosy. I think next year is going to be a little bit like this year, which is fairly uncertain, a bit up and down.
I mean, talk us through since July, since the reopening, and if you go a couple of months earlier than that, when tickets went back on sale and there was record demand. How has it been in the reality since the reopening in terms of measures that needed to be in place or the pilot data? There was lots of chatter about people just not showing up, that they'd bought the tickets, but, there was still half, it was sold out, but there was still half empty venues. Yeah. Is that, a reflection of what's been going on?
Yeah, it is. I think there's the rate of no shows in venues, it really varies, actually. So I think when things really opened up to begin with, it was 40 to 50% for some shows, people that weren't showing up for rescheduled shows, so not new stuff. Part of that, I think, is that if you bought a ticket to go with your girlfriend and maybe you split up with your girlfriend and you're not going to go to that show anymore, part of it is I think people have just forgotten that they bought the ticket or not paid attention to the fact that the thing's been rescheduled 3 times already. But there's definitely part of it is definitely people, some a portion of the concert going public that just aren't comfortable going back into venues yet.
But they didn't necessarily ask for refunds.
Fortunately not, no. Which everyone's sort of, I think lots of promoters are keeping their fingers crossed about. I mean, this. I was just saying to you before. I mean, we've just produced a kind of a recommended industry practice document, which basically says that, you know, across the industry as a whole, like we're recommending that this COVID certification is in place, which means that to go to a show, you either vaccinated, or you have antibodies, or you have a negative LFT test, and that venues are spot checking at least 20% of their audiences. So it's not possible to check every audience member before they go into a show, because just logistically it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as, you know, sort of some people going into shows are checked, and that people can still take a negative test as opposed to having to be vaccinated, then we think that's fair. You know, we think it keeps venues safe, it keeps audiences safe, and it allows live music to go on at the moment. You know, and given that if you look at, you know, many countries in Europe now are shutting back down again, and their venues are closing. The fact that we're still able to be open in the UK, I think, is a really, really positive thing. So we're pushing very hard on that at the moment, and every venue has a different kind of rule and a different plan as to how they manage that. Mm-hmm. But that's I think is the pathway through this for the time being.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, hopefully Omicron's not as you know, worrying as some of the headlines have been, and next year continues to open up. Given the challenges that exist in a promoter, you know, let's say an artist manager and their agent routing a show, and especially, you know, managing the artist's time and perhaps cross-border travel, and we've had Brexit and we've had COVID.
Yeah,
that can't be a great job at the best of times, and even harder to get right now.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, Brexit is a nightmare, absolute nightmare. I mean, the only thing positive about Brexit is that the coronavirus hid how bad it was. I mean, it's a real shame, you know. Basically, at the moment. We've got this it's called cabotage. It's really, really boring, but it's basically rules around trucking, and it's effectively, you can summarize it by saying it's the three shows and you're out of Europe rule. So if you take a truck to Europe, you could load a splitter van or a big truck, whatever, to Europe. You've got to come back after 3 shows.
Right.
Which obviously for
Can
Europe,
you send the splitter back and everyone else stays, or does everyone have to go back?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to sort of the band can stay, but the kit can't. It's got to go back. So we're spending a lot of time at the moment trying to iron out what is just a plainly completely ridiculous situation. We had a quite good win recently in Spain, which previously you had to have kind of work permits and visas and stuff, and it was actually very, very expensive to tour in Spain, which we managed to get reversed a couple of weeks ago. So there's still a couple of countries that are a problem. Croatia's still a problem. Portugal, I think, is a problem. There's a few others, but most countries now in Europe, it is possible to go and tour. The issues that we've got are, I mean, the cabotage issue is a really big one, and then also the reintroduction of carnets, which is this sort of piece of customs paperwork where you have to list everything, including how many plectrums you're taking on the tour, and then when you leave that country, you've then got to sign out those plectrums, and it's a complete nightmare. So what we had before is was really, really great, right? Complete freedom of movement and freedom of goods. And we're in this awful situation where music was not represented at all in any of the Brexit negotiations. We were not thought about, we were not discussed, and the aftermath is next year going to be a complete nightmare because there hasn't been any touring. Because most so many European markets aren't open yet. It's kind of been all right? Because the problem hasn't been visible at all. What's going to happen is that next year, when these markets reopen, it's just going to be a complete ball ache.
No, I don't envy whoever's got to do all those carnets and list out all the plectrums. And yeah, so if someone's doing a show and they're doing more than 3 gigs and they're going across the across to Paris and then on. Every time all the equipment's got to go back.
Yeah, I think you might be able to kind of cross load, but onto like a new truck. So say if you took
Right.
a UK truck into Europe, and
So
then
it's
you
not about the equipment, or it is about
I don't think it is. I might need to come back to you on that. Actually, I'm not the most,
worry.
I'm not the world's cabotage, the world's
Yeah.
best cabotage expert. But what you're talking about is the cost of it, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference between just having a truck with a driver, one or two drivers, and you go off and do something, as opposed to the time it takes to kind of arrange all this stuff, the cost of having two trucks involved, sending the truck back. It's just that, I mean, for the really big artists, they'll find a way of doing it because there's enough money in the budget to be able to do it. This is going to impact all the artists that are starting out for the first time. They've got playing enough dates in the UK to get to their first European tour. Right, it's going to affect them. It's going to affect all the mid-level acts that are playing in arena-size artists or artists that are playing in kind of smaller venues, where the budgets are much tighter. They're operating with a small crew on
not
a
just the
limited
headline
budget.
acts that can maybe afford it, but any support acts, etc.
Yeah, completely, absolutely. So it makes me very, very sad when you think about what the situation that we had before and the opportunities for UK artists to be able to go and play shows anywhere in Europe at any time that they wanted. Super easy. You get on a ferry and go and do it. And now it's a very different picture. I mean, it's a tragedy, really.
And as you say, some of this impact's been hidden by COVID. We know that in the rest of society, we've had HGV driver shortage and lack of materials for building and all the rest of it. Has the UK, pretend you're not going overseas at all, has the UK live sector been impacted by that lack of drivers, lack of stuff?
It has. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because the cabotage is so messy, a lot of UK concert hauliers are kind of giving up and doing something else. They're going to go and work for Tesco's or Amazon because they can make more money doing it. And if sort of 60 or 70% of their business has just been cut off because of Brexit, why would they still keep doing concert trucking in the UK? So Brexit will absolutely affect the UK industry as well.
And any cancellations, American artists or international artists who've not been able to, travel restrictions have been pretty up in the air as well. Has there been any major cancellations? Or
yeah, shows keep getting rescheduled and kind of move back, and there's been so many cancellations in the last 18 months. Stuff is kind of getting shunted into 23 or 22 or 23. In terms of Brexit, there've been a couple, but not loads so far. Purely because people haven't been able to sort of do an actual European tour anyway. So that's all to come, unfortunately.
So amidst all of this, you became CEO of Live, and Live was created in the middle of this chaos.
Yep.
So how's that been as an experience for you personally, and the sort of learning curve of dealing with government and bringing the sector together?
Yeah, it's been. I mean, I've never worked so hard in my life. Actually, there were sort of days when for about sort of 3 or 4 months last year, where you sit down at my dining room table at 7 a.m. and stand up at about 9:30 or 10 at night.
You remember to go to the toilet?
Literally going to the toilet with my lovely partner Anna, sort of delivering sandwiches around lunchtime. It's been a learning curve. I mean, the positive things come out of it is pre the pandemic, the live industry has always been very sort of very competitive, and the great thing about the situation is that it's brought kind of fiercely competitive people together and actually made them work collaboratively, and that's been great. So the fact that we actually have a kind of a joined up association with everybody sitting around a table is a really, really positive thing. And then personally, I mean, it's been interesting working much more closely with government. Definitely, it's not something I'd ever recommend anyone does unless they absolutely have to be honest, because it can be extremely frustrating and very tedious.
Who are you dealing with? Ministers or civil servants? Or?
So, mainly civil servants, some ministers. The Department of Music sits within is the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS, which is, or as the other government departments call it, the Fund Department. So we've been, we specifically sort of report into them. I suppose the big takeaway from it for me, sort of going into it, not having really done anything with government before, is you sort of pre-pandemic, I had this idea that there were, kind of people in power that have a kind of a grand master plan and then know exactly what's right and what's best. And actually, what you come to realise is that everyone is making it up as they go along. There is no kind of grand plan really, and I think and they're just normal human beings and individuals that are no less qualified or intelligent than anybody else, and that's not doing anyone a disservice. It's just saying that everyone's muddling along, and I think once you accept that, it becomes a little bit, you get a little bit less frustrated at the inaction that you see sometimes.
You kind of hope that perhaps the ministers are just the show ponies and the civil servants are just quietly getting on with the job and they know what they're doing. But
no, I mean that's definitely the way. I mean, really, it's all the sort of the individuals within the department that no one ever knows about that are actually doing all the legwork for sure. Yeah.
And within DCMS, people that properly understand the live business?
I mean, they do now. Yeah. So part of the problem with the commercial live industry is it's always been so successful that it's never needed a government handout, right? So we've never had a tax break, we've never had grants. I mean, all the Arts Council grants. No one's ever got one, right? Because everyone's just been working on a purely commercial basis and things have worked. So when we started conversations with government, it wasn't like the theatre sector who have existing relationships because, apart from the fact that more ministers go to the theatre than they do go to Glastonbury, but the theatre's got a history of, kind of subsidised art and kind of grants and whatever, whereas we had none of that at all, and it took 8 months to get across how the industry works, and it was a frustrating experience. But I think, again, one of the sort of positives coming out of COVID, if you can take any, is that actually we kind of exist on their radar now, right? So they understand what a festival is. They understand some of the pressures of running a commercial music venue, and I don't think they did before at all.
I think. Historically, I think it has changed in the last 10, 15 years, but historically the music industry has not been particularly good at representing itself as a unified unit or lobbying government or winning hearts and minds necessarily within the public either. And one of the reasons for that is the most obvious people to put up front are the celebrities, the famous rock stars and pop stars who everyone knows are already wealthy and rich, and so why do they need support and why do they deserve your attention other than to go and see them? I want a free ticket for the show. But the live sector employs so many people and across the all walks of life and all different skill sets, and it's really that depth of employment that was at risk and has been kind of put on pause. So I mean, give an idea of the type of jobs that exist in live music.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, we did a survey last year as sort of part of the kind of sort of lobbying plan, and actually measured how many people the sector employs, and it's just under 200,000 people, full-time equivalent roles. 55,000 people employed, like just full-time salaried. The roles are enormous. There's a really great chart actually about an arena show, and it's something like it's this kind of pyramid, and you've got like one artist on stage, and there's 400 job roles underneath it.
Wow.
Right. So that's everything from kind of promoting or producing, or like booking agents, or you've got the manager, you've got the guy that sells merchandise, to truck drivers, to video operators, to sound operators. Vision mixers. I mean, it's absolutely huge. All the backline techs as well, right? I mean, that's a whole other fascinating ecosystem just on its own in terms of like backline techs. Wow. So it's huge. I mean, that's it, and it touches I think whereas recording and publishing is very sort of, you've got record labels, marketing specialists, distribution, but I think actually with live, it touches a lot more different. It touches a lot more job roles, because to actually be able to physically move something to a physical space and put something on, and invite 1,000 people into it to watch it and make sure that they all get home safely. That's a huge undertaking, really, when you think about it. There's a lot of different kind of cogs in that wheel. So yeah, I'm not sure how many job roles there are officially, but I mean, it'd be good to maybe
the 200,000 figure is extraordinary. I think it's similar to the number that UK Music say are employed in the music industry as a whole. So it just shows how big a part of the overall employment of the music industry, the live music makes up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of disagree slightly on the employment numbers, and also on the value of the industry. I mean, I think we calculate that the live industry in total in the UK is a £4.5 billion industry, which is what, if you include all the money that's taken on ticket sales, plus what people are spending on
food and drink,
beers and food and drink and stuff, and merchandise and stuff around it. I mean, it's a substantial industry. I don't know how many times bigger than fishing, for example. I wish we were on the TV as much as fishing is.
Yeah, and why do you think that is? Obviously, as I said about the spokespeople and how maybe they're not the people to elicit sympathy, but why is the industry not as good as it could be at representing itself, getting positive headlines?
It's a good question. I mean, I think last year we worked out. So we've been working with a lobbying and PR company that are really good. I think we over the last 12 months we had 4,000 articles that I think that we got that live or a live spokesperson was in talking about the issues that we're facing. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Historically, we've been terrible. And I think because we lack that sort of celebrity kind of figure. But as you say, if we had, if we put Chris Martin up, then he'd just get a load of hassle because he doesn't need the money, right? So, although actually that said, Elton John's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on Brexit on behalf of just what kind of with the sort of live touring group, and when you do have someone like that actually is able to kind of command that sort of star power. He gets meetings that we would never get, unsurprisingly.
Yes, of course. If someone was starting out now, what would be your advice of how to break into the industry? They see events happening, they see gigs, they've been used to being in the audience, but they want to be involved in making the show happen. Where are the best, entry points? Honestly,
you can pretty much. You could pick and choose at the moment. I mean, there is such a huge shortfall of good people in the industry. I was saying before, actually, I mean, the interesting thing for me is when I was 20, 22 or something, 21, I was trying to get into the industry and wanted to do something, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had this impression that it's difficult to get into, and there are these sort of big kind of high walls, and I might not even I shouldn't even bother trying because I'm never going to do it. And actually, it's the complete opposite. So as an employer myself, I'm constantly looking for people that are just enthusiastic and will work hard and will do what they say they're going to do and not be a dick. Literally, that's sort of that's kind of the motto that I live by, and it's the same when you're trying to hire people. You don't have to know everything about everything at all. All you've got to do is show that you're enthusiastic, turn up on time, and actually give a shit. And that's literally it, right? I mean, it's it's so hard. People, I hear this sort of time and time again. Big companies just talking about how they can't find people. They can't find people, and that's across agencies, promoters, venues, production at the moment. I mean, if you wanted to do anything in production, you would literally be welcome with open arms, provided that you're not, you're going to be a sort of suitable, you're hireable, yeah. So I think actually for all of you guys, it's a fantastic time to be getting into the business or thinking about it, because you can walk into pretty much whatever you want to do. You just got to show that you're going to do it in the right way. Have the discipline, the commitment, the enthusiasm to fully commit. I mentioned earlier, I won't name who, but talking to a booker for a big music festival, and they said that they really struggled to retain or to want to retain the young people they were hiring because they're booking
a major festival, they need to know who all the hot young acts are. So they're wanting to send people out to shows all the time. So that means evening and weekends. There's busy periods where it's, endless phone calls. So they need to be in the office long hours. And they said it's really hard to find young people who are willing to commit that sort of time.
Yeah.
In the olden days, we would just put in the hours with the expectation that eventually you can sort of find your way up an organization. But there's a kind of a flittiness, let's say, of a younger generation coming through, and shout out and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, why do we have to do that hard work now? Why don't we just do the fun stuff straight away? Is that right? Or am I overgeneralizing? But have you observed anything similar?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, if you want to work in music, you need to be prepared to go out in the evening, right? It's a very, very social industry, and most of what happens in the evening, right? At gigs or wherever. So I think you have to be prepared to put in some hours, definitely. It's funny. I mean, I can always, if we if we kind of advertise for a role, you can tell really, really quickly whether someone's going to be good for it or not. I mean, the first thing you ask someone about, I run this magazine called IQ. So if I'm interviewing for a new journalist, the first question you'll ask them is, what was the last gig that you went to? And you'd be amazed at the number of people that haven't been to a gig for 3 years, but they've applied for a job on a live music magazine.
And you're not just talking about the last couple of years we've had.
No. This is before COVID. So I think you have to actually sort of be
living it.
You've got to be into what you're doing. You've got to actually like music to work in. Actually, not everybody that works in music likes music. Actually, that's probably wrong. But I think certainly when you start out, you need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those dilemmas of work, isn't it? The longer you stay in an industry, perhaps the better you are. You're going to get promoted to the point where you're no longer going to the shows and you're no longer on top of who the hot young new thing is. And so you probably, higher up the organization, you might struggle to answer that question of what's the last gig that you went to. But you'd expect the young people, that's why you need the young people with their energy, their passion, their enthusiasm to keep everyone else in touch with the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very young business, right? I mean, I feel increasingly old, to be honest, in it, and I'm 47. I mean, it's all about kind of the next big acts that are coming through, and what's new and what's hot, and what different kind of new genres are there, and what's what new kind of platform is launching that people are going to get excited about. It's very very quick. Very, very, especially in the last kind of 10 years or so, it's the sort of speed of change is accelerated massively. You've got to be kind of in the middle of that, and that for me it's really exciting. I mean, I hadn't heard the word metaverse until 3 months ago, and now I can't stop talking about it.
And do you think there's innovations around the corner in live music that can change the experience? Could make it more exciting for the audience, but to solve secondary ticketing? Is there anything going on?
Secondary ticketing. I mean, there's always innovation in live. Whether it's kind of new production stuff that kind of does things in a different way. Holograms have been a big thing in the last couple of years, and there are now there's Whitney Houston's touring again, right? I mean, which is amazing. I think there's part of what makes the live sector unique is the physicality of it, and that's something that I think is very difficult to replicate. We've seen over COVID really accelerated live streaming massively, and suddenly we're all kind of watching Glastonbury reruns in the house, or Kylie live streams, or the Billie Eilish XR one was I thought was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of a sort of time and a place in a way, and I think it's quite interesting now. Like when shows come back, like what role is there for live streaming? And I think what it is will sort of change, and it will become an accompaniment to some shows in the right time in the right place. I don't think there'll be as much of it, and we've certainly seen the interest has waned from artists, but also from audiences. I think in the last sort of 3 or 4 months as to how much they want to engage in it, but but it'll find its place, right? It'll become just sort of part of a live experience, you know. So maybe you know, in a couple of years' time, if maybe you can't afford a ticket to go and see Adele in Vegas, right? But there's one or two of those shows are live streamed, and so you get to spend 20 quid or 25 quid on an Adele show, and it's a unique experience and whatever.
And do you imagine those live streams beaming into people's homes, into local theatres, so they can watch it on, you know, a bigger sound system, or into the metaverse and they're watching it on Fortnite?
Yeah, I mean, all of those, right? I mean, the sort of the live performances in, like, you know, in kind of some of the sort of gaming platforms, like Fortnite, I think is like fascinating. That's definitely something there's going to be a lot more of. Metaverse, yeah. I mean, it's sort of reminds me a bit. Do you remember Second Life back in the day? It's like really, really old thing where the internet bandwidth was so slow that your avatar didn't move around because he just kept freezing. But it sort of feels like that, really. But just in a really good way.
Yeah, it's been talked about for, you know, 15 years, but might actually be happening. And with games like Fortnite and you know, we probably are more accustomed to what a metaverse is than you know, just it being a geeky gamer thing.
Yeah, but I think sort of that, you know, what live performance is and how live performance is presented will become broader. But I still think at the sort of heart of it all is still, you know, wanting to go and, you know, go to a venue, stand next to someone that you don't know, that's also really into that artist, that looks a bit like you or thinks a bit like you, right? There's a community aspect to it, and that's absolutely why festivals, you know, in the last kind of 15 years have just become like so big, right? Is you know, there's festivals for every different sort of like type of bit of sort of demographic in the UK now.
Are there too many festivals?
No, there should be more. But so you know, I think it's. You can't replace that, you know, and I think the more that we're homeworking, or the more we're stuck on Zooms, the more we're like spending too much time in the metaverse and getting our brains fried or whatever, the more you're actually going to need that physicality of like seeing other human beings in person, and that's, you know, unless we're fundamentally become sort of something different as human beings, I think that isn't going to change at all.
Whether it's the LEDs, you know, the backdrops and the lighting, the, you know, the big screens, the sound.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways that technology already, you know, massively improves the experience for the consumer.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, so I did this sort of stupid trip in 2011 where I got on a motorbike and I went to 26 festivals in 30 days.
Oh, you've got a Guinness World Record.
Yeah. And I sort of did it partly because I wanted to just not be in the office for a month, but also partly to sort of try and like figure festivals out. And the interesting thing was when you go around to all these different festivals, and there was like a metal festival in Slovenia and a kind of a dance festival in Hungary, and I mean like really weird, right? Even like a kids festival in Belgium, which is slightly embarrassing that I was standing in the middle of. But the one thing you realise is that everyone kind of looks the same, right? In terms of they're people that identify in a very, very similar way as the person standing next to them. You know, that doesn't matter whether it's, you know, rock or metal or, you know, kind of rap or, you know, whatever. I think we need those live experiences. They're really sort of fundamental to who we are as humans.
So which was the best festival?
The last one. No, actually, one of my favourites is there's a beautiful festival in Slovakia called Pohoda, which is set at the intersection of 3 different mountain ranges, and kind of mixes kind of art and like really off the wall booking, and it was gorgeous, actually. Yeah.
And is it true that we're not producing the sort of festival headliners of the future? Was it all the same bands you were seeing across every
at the time? Yeah, at the time there was kind of quite a lot of repetition, but I don't really buy into that. I think that I think there's so many great artists and so much great music that I think maybe some festivals, the booking in some festivals was maybe quite lazy for a while, you know, because it's easier to go with a sure bet than to sort of try and do something that's a bit kind of progressive or a bit interesting. But you know, and actually one of the sort of other things to come out of COVID is that you look at the lineups for all the festivals this summer is largely UK artists, right? Obviously, because Americans aren't coming anywhere near Europe until they know it's safe again, which will probably be about 3 years' time once they've got their confidence back. So I think it created opportunities for UK artists that weren't there before, because otherwise they would have gone to European artists or American artists. So I think, and also there were more festivals, right? And so there's more competition for those big name artists. So if you're the Foo Fighters, you can pretty much name your price at festivals at the moment, right? Because there are so many festivals that you can play, and they're competing with each other to get you the best offer. So what that does is it creates more opportunities for other acts to come through. So I think as festivals have to be more creative about their bills and what they're booking. I think it's if you're a Reading and Leeds or Glastonbury or whatever, it's a different sort of scenario, because there's a few kind of signature festivals around Europe that people will want to play, and they also have those sort of budgets. But for a lot of festivals, I think they have to operate and be a bit more clever about how they're doing it.
Yeah, I've got a question in mind, but I'm gonna open it up to the floor, see if anyone's got a question to ask you.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
Sure.
So, who's got a question for Greg? Yep.
You say when you're going on about Brexit and it now being difficult to tour in Western Europe, how is it you were kind of showing that you have the support behind you to change that to the government? Within Live, there's a sort of live touring group, which is has kind of representatives of lots of the different associations. UK Music are in it as well. And like the Association of British Orchestras and some associations that aren't in Live. So it's quite a big kind of coalition. So DCMS have kind of fortnightly or monthly meetings about Brexit, which we're sort of front and centre in. And there are other groups in that as well. So, there are other sort of organisations that are also sort of doing similar things. So it's really just about like lobbying continuously, like writing to ministers, looking at how we're placing stories in media as well. So there's definitely kind of a press angle in terms of trying to sort of leverage sort of favour, I suppose. And it's just a lot of work, right? It's just kind of lots of different meetings, lots of collecting evidence as well. So government doesn't really do anything unless it's got like really sort of solid evidence as to what the sort of shape of the problem is. So every time we hear about like a problem at a border or whatever, then we'll be kind of collating that, and reporting it to DCMS as well. So yeah, does that answer the question? Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
So it's a bit difficult to hear, actually.
Do we have a mic at all for our questioner or not? Or do you want to step forward?
Yeah, no, I'm a bit past standing. What would you say to an artist with like little to no following, social media following, who has music, is ready to perform, is ready to sort of showcase their initial output, but hasn't released any performance well? Because I am that artist, and I'm intending to release my initial EP next year. Where I'm thinking, how far ahead do I plan for a listening party event type scenario thing? I'm thinking 3 months to really have good perspective on it. However, I don't know if that's too far in the past or not far enough.
Are you playing live at the moment?
Yeah, here and there. Kind of open mic and supporting friends and stuff, but like, being on stage isn't really nothing new. It's just doing it myself as my own headliner.
Yes, in terms of sort of like releasing stuff, because all of my sort of focus is on live as opposed to like recording and publishing. I'm not sure I'm going to be like that helpful, but I would definitely say, there's a whole sort of like network. Every venue in the UK, right, has a really enthusiastic booker, right, who's really into music, and a lot of them do it for the love of it. So, in terms of sort of helping to kind of spread the word, like going out and playing live is like super important, right? Not just in terms of like honing like your skills, but also in terms of potentially getting discovered, because those bookers will also have a relationship with kind of labels or A&R or whatever, because those guys will be coming down to the clubs as well. So I think it's like, 3 months sounds like a sort of sensible amount of time to plan, definitely. I mean, I think especially if you're going to be getting a lot of people sort of down to it and giving them enough time to actually sort of like come back to you in order to kind of, you know, generate interest. But I would say definitely like starting to play live more often and like starting to build like a bit of a sort of a following and a fan base is like really, really, really key. I mean, most like agents, for example, will typically, whenever they're sort of sent, you know, kind of told about a new artist or they get approached by a new artist, the first thing they're going to look at is like Spotify plays, so like, you know, sort of so you know, some number of likes on YouTube or, you know, social reach. So those things are definitely important in terms of kind of generating interest around yourself, but also you can kind of trump all that with like a really great live show. So, you know, if you kind of come out of the traps and you've got this and you're, you know, absolutely amazing live, the rest of it kind of doesn't really matter in a way, because if you can get, say, an agent that to come down to the show that then, you know, believes in what you're doing, the rest of that stuff can actually get kind of built up over time anyway. So I don't know if that helps or not.
How does a young artist find themselves an agent, and what stage of their career should they be doing that?
Yeah, good question. I think agents are signing acts much kind of earlier now than maybe they used to. I mean, certainly pre-pandemic, there were a lot more agents than there ever had been. There's been a bit of a cull, because I think obviously some of them have sort of gone, you know, the jobs have gone. But yeah, I think you know, it's networking, isn't it? You know, if you're at a gig and that person's there as well, like go and introduce yourself. You know, it's a similar sort of thing as what we're saying about like trying to find good people, like just being enthusiastic and being up for it, right? I mean, that really goes a long way. So stuff like that. I mean, you can't like underestimate just walking up to someone in a show and being like, "Hey, I'm so and so. I'm absolutely fucking brilliant. You should listen to this," you know, because they will, because so few people would actually do that, right? So yeah, I think if you're sort of, you know, sort of sending in links to music and stuff sort of unsolicited, I think it's probably quite difficult, especially if you've not got the, you know, kind of that's, you know, sort of followers, or, you know, you're not sort of doing stuff on in terms of sort of streaming numbers. But again, you know, I think you can get around that though, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And so you're saying agents are less choosy or more choosy because they've got the confidence of all the stats from social media, or are they getting in really early? Are artists getting agents before they're getting managers?
In some cases, yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. I think agents are taking on artists earlier now than, I think typically, you know, they'd sort of wait until there's a management team and a label, and then they'd sort of step in and help kind of craft that live career. But increasingly, I think, you know, people are signing artists or certainly getting involved with artists earlier than they were previously. Yeah.
And what was your background within the sector? Obviously, you're CEO of Live, running the conference now. Is it the conference? Is that your history, or have you done all the different roles?
Well, I started out playing in a band, like probably most people in the industry, and then got into journalism. So was writing for a magazine called Audience, which no longer exists, but it's a sort of live music industry magazine. And then started working for ILMC for it's sort of helping on the conference, and also editing IQ. And then I took the business over about 7 years ago now from the founder. So yeah, so I've been lucky in that I've always worked in music. You know, I mean, it's always what I knew I wanted to do it from sort of day one. Really, you know, initially I wanted to be like a massive rock and roll star, but like 99.99% of everybody that gets into it doesn't happen. So, which is probably good actually. I probably wouldn't be alive now anyway.
And did you ever aspire to being a CEO of a trade body?
No. Not at all. No, I did it because it needed to be done, you know, really. And I feel, you know, I'm very passionate about the live music industry and always have been. And it kind of irks me that we were in this sort of situation. And clearly, I mean, there's a lot of people that have been really, really active on Live. You know, I mean, I wouldn't want it to sort of come across as though it's sort of just me doing it. There's a sort of whole team of, you know, really great promoters and agents and lobbying companies and whatever else as well. But no, I certainly didn't see trade associations being being their direction, and I don't see it as being a long term direction either, to be honest.
And who are you accountable to in terms of who's breathing down your neck, if anyone, as representing the sector? Is it the big promoters or?
Yeah. So the big companies, the big agents, big promoters, big venue operators. I mean, it's really, we have a monthly call where there's probably sort of 60 or 70 people on a monthly Zoom call, and it's all the sort of
60 or 70 people on a monthly Zoom call.
Yeah, and it's all the sort of top people in the live sector, really sort of listen in and make sure that you've not
Sounds
messed
like the
anything
conference,
up.
but without the audience.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Did you have another question, by the way?
I'm not too fussed about filling up the room. I'd love to, but I'm more sort of concerned about who's in the room. And like you were saying about like going to booking agents and speaking to the right people. But how do I go about networking with people? Not like sending messages, emails, but like really getting in front of these people and saying, hey, I've got this gig, you should come and you should see me, and then I can move on to further talks about representation, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I feel like for me personally, I'd rather go direct, but I don't know which door to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're gonna say you're gonna kind of approach an agent, right? You want to get them down to a show that's full, right? So yes, I think it's important to get your live show to a point that you are pulling 50, 100 people, or in that size venue or whatever, right? And then I think then it's just kind of the right time. So I mean, in terms of how do you get in front of those people? I mean, a lot of them are out all the time at gigs anyway, right? So if you're going to those same gigs, and then you can find out who they are, go and say hello, or drop them a note and say you're going to be there. It'd be great to sort of see you, or something like that.
What's the favourite sort of A&R or agent hangout these days? Is there still one, or are they all online?
I've got no idea actually about A&Rs, to be honest. No, I'm so far removed from that part of the sector that I really couldn't say. I mean, I know that places like there's the Great Escape in Brighton, right, which is every April or May. I mean, that's sort of 3,000, 4,000 people, industry people just sort of descend on Brighton. I mean, that would be a great place to you buy a pass to that, just to be able to sort of like go out and network and meet people. That's a great way to like bump into people. Or I mean, if there are like other kind of artists or other bands that that are sort of a little bit further ahead, or have got a sort of slightly bigger audience, maybe sort of is there a way of kind of hooking up with them, for example, to start to sort of meet the same people that they know, for example. Yeah, I mean, I suppose also, things like this are also really good, right? If you've got, if the next time that Anthony's got like an agent down, then like make sure that you're here to like introduce yourself to them at the same time, right? So I think it's to go back to what I said about when I was kind of younger trying to get into the industry. I thought it was really impossible, but actually in hindsight, it really isn't that difficult. It's just about sort of showing up, really. I think a lot of the time.
Who should we be booking? Who are the colourful characters within the agent community, or promoters who we should have down for a chat?
There's loads. There's loads. No, I mean, you could take any agency, and there's a load of really great characters in all of them. So yeah, I think there's. Happy to give you some recommendations if you want, but yeah, I mean, it's the. People are generally like super enthusiastic about kind of bringing through new music, new artists, and building the business, and they're passionate about their jobs. So it's not that difficult. It isn't at all. Provided you're at a stage where you're good and you're what you've got is gonna interest people, and people are going to buy tickets for it, right?
Are there any cool tricks of the trade you know of, like minibusing in your fans across the country to shows?
Yeah, I mean all that stuff. I suppose you could pay people to go to your show, couldn't you, as well, or rent an audience or something? Yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been sort of trying to like sell a venue and get people along to my show. So it's probably kind of completely changed now. But it feels like there's sort of there are so many more opportunities to get your music heard these days than there used to be, which is fantastic. And there are so many more opportunities of places to play as well. So I think it's a really good time to be a musician, to be honest. Probably the best time than there's ever been.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the revenue from the Ed Sheeran World Tour, and it's just mainly, well, of course, it's a whole crew and everything, but it's him and his guitar, and what, 290 million pounds of takings.
Was it? Yeah, that's a decent amount of money, isn't it?
So I think, rewards have never been higher, certainly at the top end.
Yeah, no, very true.
Probably got time for one final question. If there's anything that you don't understand about the live sector or anything, you really want to know, there's two questions actually. So in the audience first.
What would you say would be a good entry-level position to get into like a promoting company or event manager?
So for a promoting company, probably just kind of an assistant, right? So they probably just get you doing stuff, right? So using the computer systems, doing the database stuff, helping out with marketing, whatever. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. I think what you need, if you want to be a promoter, then I mean, start promoting your own shows, right? First and foremost, because I think that's a really great way of getting people's attention. It's a great thing to put on your CV. Beyond that, though, I think you just need to get inside, get into a company, and then just prove yourself within it. Most promoters actually are kind of start out as like independent promoters, so they'll start just making mistakes on their own, learning how to do it. Running kind of club nights for their mates or whatever, and maybe that gets a little bit bigger, or maybe they start kind of just promoting in a specific venue or a specific sort of region, and then typically they'll then get hired. So I think it depends what you want to do. If you wanted to be head of marketing and a promoter, then it's much better to sort of go in at the ground floor and just work out how they're doing their social media campaigns, right, and sort of start to learn that way. But I don't think it really matters. I think there's especially with those kind of like entry level roles, there's so much possibility just to move sideways or just to do different things and just try stuff and see what works. You don't have to always do the same thing either. So you're not going to get kind of pigeonholed as soon as you go into a role like that and saying, like Jack's only ever going to do that because that's what we've hired him to do. If there's something that you're like really passionate about, once you've got your foot in the door, then you can find a way of making that happen. Just through sort of working with the person that's doing it, or just talking to people that are above you about the fact that you want to do it or whatever. So I would just say get in as however you can, to be honest. Unless you're a promoter, if you specifically want to promote, then just start promoting. Yeah.
And you're saying get in the door and then show that commitment, that passion, that work ethic to make yourself useful, and then find your path from there.
Yeah, that's it.
Definitely. I think Florian behind the camera has got a question.
Hi. It's kind of a follow-up from this, really. For young artists who are starting to promote their own shows, you have maybe one or two London-based venues between like 100 and 150 cap to recommend?
The Music Box.
This is good. What's wrong with this? Seriously, especially if you get all the production for free.
Well, it's great for the students to have this and to have access to it with all the equipment and all the stuff, but it can produce a bit of a bubble where then they then go out and they're not surrounded by enthusiastic peers and tutors and the whole team.
Yeah.
You've got to do it for scratch. So where should they be?
Oh, I mean, 100 capacity. I actually don't. I don't know what 100 capacity venues you recommend. I mean, there's the venues that I used to spend a lot of time with, people like places like Dingwalls in Camden, or the 100 Club. For small venue, I mean, there's the Old Blue Last in Shoreditch. I mean, it really depends on like where you are and what you want to do. For like venues that fit 100 people, there's I think there's a lot of them, So I probably wouldn't really be able to
to pinpoint like one or two like really sort of specific ones. Partly because most of what I seem to do is related to like bigger venues rather than sort of smaller stuff. But yeah, probably haven't answered that question very well. Damn, it was going so well.
You know,
You ruined it. I
I'm-
can't believe it, Florian.
I'm sure our students probably know the right places to be playing. They're just trying to get the agent or the booker.
No.
It's basically in Parmley. Basically, I would play, like when you go to Syracuse, basically it's like this venue, but it's very new. It's called the Avalon Cafe, and then it's probably like 100 capacity. It's very new, but they literally like get like young artists and up and coming, and not really like famous artists, but it's easy to do. So it would be nice like if you can do that. I think we would
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Love that. That's great.
Excellent. Well, just to wrap, just to wrap up before I trash my phone. Tell us what's next for you. Your conference is coming up. Is it going to go ahead? What's
Yeah,
gonna-
we've got so ILMC is in March, which I'm hoping will go ahead physically. So we have about 2,000 people from around the world come into London, get very drunk for 4 days and do deals. Hope that happens. We also have another event in September called the International Festival Forum, where we get 600 of the sort of biggest festivals around Europe and internationally come into London to meet with all the agents, and we have lots of showcases in Camden and stuff. So that I think will happen next year. And then from an IQ point of view, just definitely kind of trying to kind of expand what we do and produce more content and get into more people's inboxes really.
Fantastic. Sounds like you've got a lot going on, juggling all those different roles and across the lobbying, the conference and the magazine. We wish you well for the next 6 months. We hope we see the recovery we all want to see. And really enjoyed my chat with you, Greg, and appreciate you coming down. We'll get you a drink at the bar, and if the students have any other questions, I'm sure you'd hang around for 5-10 minutes to
Sounds good. Thanks
to
for
chat
having
to
me.
them. Let's hear it for Greg.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.